Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, "The Time My Buddy Left a Loaded Semi-Truck Halfway Across the Country." This is not my story, but I thought it's worthy to share. For background, my buddy is my now husband's best friend. They met while overseas and have been best friends and roommates on and off basically until we bought our own home. They are basically brothers in quite the package deal. Anyway, I'll call my buddy Mac. Mac was an over-the-road trucker at the time that this happened and was working for an entry-level company. Those companies have their place since they help people acquire a CDL and the first year or two of experience so that other companies will be able to accept you, insurance reasons mostly. Unfortunately, the downside to companies like these are as follows. 1. Inexperienced drivers. 2. Many of the instructors are also inexperienced. 3. Pay is mediocre for industry standards. 4. The dispatchers often asked for unreasonable/undrivable tasks. Don't award home time very easily, and you're basically just a number. We generally put up with companies like this at first to get our feet wet and gain those precious miles and years to make us more hireable down the road, so to speak. Anyway, Mac had been driving for this company for approximately a year when he was at the time halfway across the country from his home base when he got a phone call. His best friend, my current husband, was in the hospital with a potentially fatal infection. Mac immediately called dispatch to inform them that he was making an immediate U-turn and heading straight home. Here's where the compliance comes in. They told him that if he deviates from his route in any way that he would be fired immediately. They didn't care that he might lose his best friend and told him to suck it up and do his job. He said, "Fine, I quit." He pulled over at the nearest truck stop, parked the truck thousands of miles from his home base and left it. He cleaned it out and took a Greyhound home if memory serves. His old company had to have his tractor and fully loaded trailer towed thousands of miles. Not only that, but they were late on the precious delivery of what was on his trailer. Let me tell you, nothing about that is cheap. Mac now works for a smaller, family-owned company and is home daily, or at least every weekend, and is paid much better. Hope you enjoyed. This story always cracks me up. Next one is titled, "Demand I Don't Keep Your Phone." Okay. This was a long time ago, but something similar happened to me last week and reminded me of this story. Thought you might enjoy. My wife and I were going through airport security in Dallas. Put all our stuff in our bins, unpacked our computers, emptied our pockets, took off our shoes, belt, etc. Standard procedure, pretty mindless. We get through the X-ray and gather up our things. If you've been to Dallas, you often have to then take a tram to your gate as it's a very sprawling airport. About 10 minutes after, my wife's phone rings in her pocket. So she picks up and says hello. Now, this was long enough ago that a lot of phones all looked the same. There weren't all the different protective cases and things. Many phones looked alike. They were probably 60% the size of a normal smartphone today. They were just blue or red or black. The person calling was actually calling his own phone that my wife had picked up after security. What had happened? My wife had her phone in her purse. The guy just ahead of her had already put his bags on the belt but forgot to take his phone out of his pocket. So, when he goes through the scan, he triggers the alarm. They make him get out of line and empty his pockets. He decides it's a good idea to just put his phone into the same tray as my wife's purse, shoes, belt. So he is now several people behind us in line. And when my wife picks up her things, she sees what she thinks is her phone in the tray and picks it up. She now unknowingly has her phone in her purse, and this guy's phone in her pocket. A completely innocent mistake, if anything. So now the phone owner calls his phone, and she picks it up. If he had just said, "Hey, we had a goof up here, you have my phone," everything would have been fine. Just would have met up to give him his phone back. Instead, he starts screaming at her about how she stole his phone, and we better bring it back right now. She is a bit confused. For a moment thought it was her phone. We were both baffled. He continues to scream at her. So I take the phone and try to tell him it's no big deal. I can meet him and get him his phone back. He continues to call my wife a thief and demands to know where we are. He keeps screaming, "You will not have my phone, you thief." So I told him what was going to happen next, hung up on him, and flushed his phone down a toilet. Next one is titled, I only get paid $10 for every barrel with metal, regardless of how much overflows. Okay, let's get 2 barrels. So as a mechanic with all spare metal parts, we have these 3 green barrels where we chuck anything and everything metal that is no longer of use. About every month or so we have the metal guy come out and collect the metal and gives us however much he thinks it's worth. We only usually barely fill up the top of the barrels and gives us about $10 each, free money, so we're happy. One month we were particularly busy and filled all the barrels, so we just started piling up the metal. It was a lot of metal, so we were all excited to get a couple more bucks. When the guy came around, he still only gave us $10, and we argued, saying that it's worth way more than that. He shrugged it off and left. So halfway through the month, we had him come on a weekly basis, to which he was more than happy to do. So now he comes every week and gives us $10, even if the barrel is only about 75% filled. He never even thought twice about it. Next one is titled, "We have to ask permission to schedule patients." Okay, this is not my own MC, but if I were in the right department, I totally would have jumped on the bandwagon, and I have mad respect for the schedulers who I work with. So, I work for a medical imaging facility. We have a scheduling department that has been under a lot of pressure in the past month or so to fill our schedules and get our numbers up so that we look better to corporate. In the midst of this happening, the hospitals in our area have put a pause on all elective surgeries as a result of the pandemic, but the management at my company has refused to acknowledge how that might affect us, and instead opted to put even more pressure on our schedulers and blame them when our schedules are not full. Also, I'd like to add that the metrics that they are using to grade the schedulers are dumb. Instead of requiring them to make a certain number of calls per hour, they are requiring them to schedule a minimum of 25 patients per day. You can make 60 calls a day, but if the patients you call don't pick up their phones, then two-ducking bad. They'd also been on a tier about noting in the chart if a patient can't come in earlier than their scheduled appointment. For example, if a patient requests an appointment a week out, they are supposed to offer weekend and evening appointments, and if the patient still says no, it needs to be noted. One of our schedulers is literally referred to as a saint by everyone in the company. She is the sweetest woman I have ever met, and although I'm not a religious person, she is the ideal form of Christian. She is non-judgmental, thoughtful, genuine with everyone, and she really cares about all of our patients. We threw her a little birthday party a couple weeks ago, and she wrote a thank you note and brought it in the next day. Most people just send an email, but she went the extra mile to express her gratitude. This saint has been under even more pressure than the rest of our schedulers because her numbers are consistently low. Never mind that the woman has worked for the company for 18 years and never makes a mistake. They are constantly publicly announcing that she scheduled fewer patients than anyone else the previous day. So this week, management sent out an urgent IM to all the schedulers, basically saying, instead of noting in the chart that a patient can't come in, please ask permission from your manager before scheduling a patient further than 4 days out. We need to fill the schedules and hope this will help us reach our goals. Immediately, they get about 15 responses from every single scheduler, except the saint, of course, saying that this is stupid and what the hell does management think they are going to do that the scheduler can't, but management ignores it. So, our saint continues doing her job and almost immediately gets a patient who can't come in for a week. She sends an IM to that group chat so every single scheduler and manager on it can see. John Doe, MRN #12345, patient states he cannot come in because he will be out of the state for his job. Is it okay to schedule him for Oct 9th, the day after he returns? The first time, management just says sure, whatever, but then Saint does it 2 more times. Jane Smith she has children in school and the first date she isn't tied up with their school activities is Oct 14. Can I schedule her? Janice Cho, she can't drive anymore and her children aren't available to bring her in until Oct 8. Can I schedule her? One of the other schedulers comes out from behind her cubicle and says, "You know we can see those messages you are sending, right?" Saint just grins. Finally, she sends her last message, the 4th patient within about an hour and a half, to which a manager finally responds, "You don't need to message this chat with that information." The chat goes completely dead for a little bit. About an hour later, the manager of the entire state sends out a message saying, "After reevaluating, we have decided this is not effective. Please resume noting in the chart when patients cannot come in for 4 more days." Saint came up to me near the end of the day, happier than I have seen her in weeks. They think I was doing that because I did no better, but I was doing it on purpose. Next one is titled, You want me to stay at the slicer? Okay. I work part-time at Arby's. We are known for our roast beef, which is sliced to order with a slicer. Our beef and cheddar plus roast beef sandwiches are the most popular, so when you're in the kitchen, you're going to be using the slicer a lot. I am 17. Legally, you have to be 18 to operate it, but at my location, we don't listen to it at all. My general manager pretty much says, as long as you don't duck around with it, I don't care. We all know the dangers of the slicer, and we know not to treat it like a toy. So I'm a great deal younger than the subject of this story, Rebecca, who was born in '51. She thinks teenagers are just incompetent children. She has it out for me, and on some days it feels like she is analyzing my every move to criticize me if I make a mistake. Why does she have a grudge against me? Because she has a God complex, and I put my foot down. Today, we had 2 people in the kitchen, me and Rebecca. Fun. Now, our menu isn't completely composed of beef products. To name a few, we have the brisket, Reuben, gyros, which sometimes have beef but I digress, turkey ranch and bacon, and a slew of wraps, and that's not even our full menu. That's just to give you an idea of how much more we have than the beef. At one point, we got someone who ordered 4 briskets at once. One person can only do so much, so when I saw that Rebecca was struggling to handle it by herself, I decided to come over and help. I take the bottle of mayo from the tray and start putting it on the buns that required it. Rebecca saw this, and instead of working together, she decided it would be a good idea to rip the bottle from my hand, push me to the side, and say, "No, you just stay over at the slicer. I got this, okay?" So I go over to the slicer. I look up at the monitor. I see that someone up at the front counter ordered 3 roast beef sandwiches, so I quickly make those and send them out. I look back up. Drive-through wants a beef and cheddar double. I make it and send it out. Look back up. Nothing that requires roast beef. I do, however, see that there are several different sandwiches not containing beef. The type of stuff you have to focus on. The type of stuff you can't do on your own. I figured, hey, she wanted me to stay at the slicer. So that's exactly what I did. After double-checking to make sure there wasn't anything that I needed to do with beef, I sat down on the floor, brought my phone out, then started browsing Reddit. About 10 seconds later, which doesn't seem like long, but in fast food every second counts, I look back up at her. She is running back and forth, scrambling to get even one thing done because she's trying to do everything at once. I look up. A roast beef slider is up on the monitor. So I stand up, slice some beef, measure out 1.5 ounces, and set it on the counter next to her since her side of the kitchen is where the slider buns and cheese and stuff are at. So it's her responsibility since she wants that part of the kitchen to herself. It was at this point I made eye contact with her and smiled. It may have seemed like an "I'm happy to be helping you" smile, but it was more of an "it's amusing to me that your instructions are backfiring horribly" smile. I then sat back down and continued fiddling with my phone. Now, my manager Julie wasn't happy about the fact that Rebecca was pushing me away and not letting me help. Julie actually found my reaction to the situation funny, but she wasn't laughing while she chewed Rebecca out for being a witch and shoving me out of the way. Last one is titled, "Mom Says No to Everything." Try this one cool trick. I think this story counts as MC, though it is a bit of a flip on the usual version. This is a story from when I was 20 years old. I had been able to study abroad for a short time. Near what was to be the end of my stay abroad, 2 friends invited me to travel with them a few extra days before heading home. I could change my plane ticket, but I would need additional money from home to do this extra trip. I knew the money itself would not be the problem. It was my mother that would be. My mother was very controlling. Everything always had to be her way. I was to do everything she expected of me, and my own ideas were always wrong. She has an idea in her head of how things should be, and then if they are not exactly as she thought, she needs to everyone what they are doing wrong. She had initially, predictably, freaked out about my idea to study abroad at all, as she could not accept something so outside her own ideas. I'd never even been there, she yelled. But my dad talked her into it. I knew she'd now say no to my request to do further traveling to more unknown places, and to me changing my date to return home. However, I really wanted to go. I thought about this problem for days, and then I knew. I also had a boyfriend back home, Mark, and my mom was not a fan. Mark was a good boyfriend to me, but didn't meet my mom's standards. So I told her that my friends were going on this amazing trip, and I really wanted to go. But I was feeling very conflicted because Mark was saying he had already missed me too much, and he wanted me to come home as soon as school ended so we could be back together. I didn't mention the fact I couldn't afford to go without my mom's approval. I just acted like going was something I was going to do, except I maybe wasn't, because Mark was being very demanding about this. My mother was indignant. How dare Mark tell me what to do? That was very unthoughtful of him to try to cut short such a great experience for me to travel. A good boyfriend wouldn't do that, and it was his own problem if this makes him mad. She said I was to go on this trip, no matter what Mark said, and I could have the funds to cover those extra days. So I complied. Thanks for listening.